And good morning. We are live on YouTube, but we want to be live on Facebook as well. So we're going to bring in Atlanta Falcons fans on Al Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports, both of those Facebook pages. And then we'll get started. So welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. I am Scott Kennedy. I will be flying solo. See what I did there? Flying solo today. Nick is still out and doing all kinds of outdoorsy stuff, so it will be just me today. But it's been a little while since we've gotten together and figured, you know what, solo or not, need to be here to catch up on some of the news and make sure that y'all don't forget about us. Lots of stuff going on in the past 2 weeks since we've seen you last with the Atlanta Falcons. Some of the things we want to get into today, I want to get into new signing, another defensive back. I want to get into breakout players. There's been players, and there's kind of a new one on there. So there's a receiver, there's a linebacker, and there's another linebacker, but maybe not the one you thought. So we'll get into that one a little bit. That's being talked about in the national media, and we will also talk about. We'll go through some of the PFF positional rankings. Some good, some bad, some questionable. That's understandable. So I won't be too tough on those guys. But appreciate everybody for coming back and seeing us. And Michael Ranquillo is in nice and early. Says good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. And good morning to you, Michael. I hope all is well. And Roderick coming in from across the pond says, afternoon all, seems like a long time. Hope you had a break, Scott. I had a break from podcasting. Been working, though. I filled in on a couple, but this is the first one in 2 weeks that we've been here. So we were here 2 weeks ago last Wednesday. So we missed 3 shows, I think. But it's good to be back, and we'll be back on our regular schedule from here on out, which if you're listening after the fact, we go live on youtube.com/Scott Kennedy every Monday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. So we'll keep doing that, and we'll get back on schedule here. But with Memorial Day falling on that Monday, Nick being out of town, we didn't do it this Monday. And then this past Monday, on a personal note, my son started his first day of football. So he joined the football team as a freshman. He's going to be a freshman in high school. He'd been playing soccer and baseball. He is not playing soccer anymore. And he's playing baseball, and he's going to play football. He's probably going to be about 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds or so, and he can fly. So I told him run at wide receiver and safety. And right now he's about 5'11", 150, 155. He says, I want to play running back. I run. That's what I do. I'm like, dude, that's an easy position for you to get started, get into it. I won't talk you into it when you're 6'3", 185 as a junior. Maybe we'll talk more wide receiver. So he's enjoying that. So that's where I was on Monday morning, kind of making sure everything got going okay. And he's been doing all his workouts and stuff. So back on Wednesday. That's enough of the personal stuff. Unless you ask, then I'll tell you. Kevin Fitzpatrick coming in says, good morning, all. Good morning. Coming in on Facebook, and welcome back, Kevin. Kevin Mapp coming in. We got Kevins all over the place saying good morning. And he's saying, Chris, come on. So we're waiting to see Chris Walker. He'll probably be in here before too long as well. So my lost sheep are coming back. So I appreciate everybody coming back in here. But first matter of business I wanted to talk about here real quick was a new signing for the Atlanta Falcons. It was Breon Borders. Had the story on allfalcons.com. Breon is brought in as a cornerback / defensive back special teams guy. Will be part of the 90. I think he's a little bit of a long shot to make the 53, but he's the type of player I said that the Falcons were able to bring in who's got starting experience in the past. Before anybody with starting experience was basically a starter in the last 2 years as they were scraping together all the pieces they could. Now they're looking for depth pieces, and maybe you get a camp surprise in here. He played with the Jaguars, and naturally he also played with the Titans and Bears. I'm like, well, he hit the double for new Atlanta Falcons. Usually it's one or the other, but he played for the Titans and Bears. And he had his best season in Tennessee with the Titans in 2020, which was Arthur Smith's last year there. So there's some familiarity there. He'll be working for a spot at the cornerback position, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not overly optimistic that he's going to be a starter by any stretch. I think you're looking at A.J. Terrell, Mike Hughes, and Jeffrey Okudah as your 3 first-in guys, but he's certainly got a chance to make a spot after that. want to say hello to Raymond Collins coming in as well. He says hello and good morning. Good morning to you as well. So I'm not overly familiar with Breon other than what I've read off the stats. But the stats tell me that, hey, he's going to have a hard time beating out those first three guys, but could come in as a special teams guy, could come in as a fourth, fifth, sixth defensive back who has played a little bit of safety as well. So we'll see on that one. But right now, part of the 90, there will be, you get 53 in a 16-man practice squad. So that means there will be 21 guys that will no longer be Atlanta Falcons, assuming they don't bring anybody else in. So he's got a chance to make that 70. It's 69, I know. That 70, including a practice squad, and would be a nice piece to have around for depth, for experience, but not necessarily someone you're penciling in to get in a lot of playing time. So that was Breon Borders who came in. You grab a quick sip of coffee. This is our friend over in Hawaii, Patrick Wiltsey. He keeps us all caffeinated from lioncoffee.com. So if you're looking for some good Hawaiian coffee, check it out, lioncoffee.com. I'm going to take a slug real quick. So Jamal comes in on YouTube. He says, good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, Jamal. And Kevin Mapp says, I like the philosophy of bringing in tons of players as backups, trying them out. That is how you find hidden gems. It's not only that, Kevin. I mean, you get to bring in 90 during the summer before you pare it down to 53, and then you re-sign. Everybody always says, oh, this is a practice squad guy, but you do have to cut those guys first to re-sign them. So you have to expose them to the waiver wire. But the thing is most everybody re-signs their own. Like the 16 guys that were signed are almost always from that original 90-man roster. So everybody's really doing that. You build up to 90. The difference for me this year, Kevin, is the guys that are 54 to 90 are a lot better football players than we've seen in the past. No offense to anybody else, but the Falcons are able to shop in a different talent pool this year than they have the last 2 years. This is a guy who would be one of the more experienced starters that you were bringing in over the last 2 years to come in and play. So I think you're going to see, again, the talent level, the floor. We talk about the floor in the room is just so much higher. The ceiling in this cornerback room, especially, I mean, let's just look at the defensive back room. If Jeffrey Okudah can have a year where he is able to come closer to his number 3 overall pick potential, okay, that's going to be real good, and he's going to get paid. So what? He's on the last year of a deal, low-risk deal for the Atlanta Falcons. The Detroit Lions are picking up a big chunk of money. A.J. Terrell, he's entering they'll pick up his option if they haven't already. Sure they did. I'm getting confused on my ears, but he's about to get paid too. So then you talk about Richie Grant, year 3, Jesse Bates, who's about the same age, despite going into his 6th year, I think. Mike Hughes, solid player. You know, last year we're bringing in Eric Harris. You're bringing in guys, Fabian Moreau. That one was a bad one. Those guys would be backups to backups. It's trying to make the squad right now. So I'm really pretty happy about the level of talent these guys are bringing in for depth pieces. It's nice. It's really nice. So let me go. I want to say hello to Chris. We thought Chris might be able to make it in here. He says, finally, after 2 weeks. Yes, Chris, apologies. We were Memorial Day, and then Nick was out of town for a week, and then I was out on Monday. So we're back 9 a.m. Monday and Wednesday, and we'll tweak the schedule a little bit, but follow me on Twitter, and we'll keep everybody up to date. Ryan comes in. Good to see you, Ryan. Hope you're doing well. Ryan Adonis, he's really, really good on YouTube comments. So not just in the chats, but after the fact, commenting on all the videos and the stories we link. We use YouTube to distribute our stories too, and Ryan's always in the conversation there. So thank you, Ryan. He says, hey, Scott, were you able to see the Falcons live in person? No, not at OTAs. And Ryan, I'll be perfectly honest with you, because I was doing a Broncos podcast and I said, no, I didn't really go out of my way to watch OTAs. And someone was like, you sometimes you can really tell that he's not a Broncos guy. I'm like, dude, I don't care who it is. I'm not spending 6 hours of my day traveling and watching and doing everything to watch OTAs. They're kind of boring. You're not going to learn a whole lot until these guys start popping pads. And even then, one, you're not allowed to watch a whole lot of practice anyway. Two, you're only going to see what they want you to see for the most part. So I did not go see them live and in person. Looking forward to summer camp, though. I went to a practice last year. I'll probably go to a couple this year as well. Some of the things you learn in those are, one, you get an idea for size. Okay, big deal. When you see Calais Campbell standing next to Jonnu Smith, it's unbelievable. It really is how big Calais Campbell is. This is going to be a different defense, everybody. This is the talent that they've been able to bring in through free agency. I feel bad for Dean Peace, who was putting together a defense with duct tape, cast-offs from the Bears and the Titans. Grady Jarrett, Deion Jones goes out. AJ Terrell was really good, and some rookies. And it was tough. Now, $250 million on the defensive side of the ball now. And what the other part that's interesting to me is, as far as all that money is, there's not a lot invested long-term. You figure David Onyemata is out there. He's got a couple-year deal, but, Bud Dupree is someone who can come in and hopefully do a job in 1 year. Calais Campbell's on 1 year. So as fun as it was talking about all the signings, maybe the two that you got for the longest term were Jesse Bates, young guy, and Caden Ellis, a young guy. But when you talk about Bud Dupree, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata, Okudah, these guys are all basically on 1 year deals. Onyemata's probably got a 2 before it makes it. Even if you say, if a guy has a 4-year deal, but all the money is in a signing bonus, and you look at that dead cap number in year 3 and 4, and there's no dead cap, it's a 2-year deal with club options. So that's how I say, like Marcus Mariota last year had a 2-year contract. No, he didn't. He had a 1-year contract with a club option because there was no penalty to cutting him. So as fun as this offseason was, while this team is rebuilding, they're gonna have a ton of money next year too. And then they can decide on which of those guys they want to bring back in. The other part of OTAs, you see some guys coming back from injury. I want to see how they're moving, what they're allowing to do. The Falcons really haven't had that much of a problem. The only guy that we're still really waiting on to see is Kyle Pitts. So if he's not out there, there's not a ton I'm going to be able to watch to learn from OTAs. Let me see here real quick on Roderick had a question. He says, what's your pick on our 4th round pick, Scott? 4th round pick out of Utah is interesting to me. Cornerback, Clark Phillips. What's interesting to me is how polar opposite he is than the 3rd round pick. Zach Harrison. I haven't looked at these guys in 2 weeks, and they haven't etched their way into my brain just yet. As far as the draft picks go, they're polar opposites. And what I mean by that is a 3rd round pick was all physicality. He's an edge with all the tools in the world, but not the production. That's why he falls to the 3rd. High upside, big bust factor. But when you're taking a guy in the 3rd round, I think what would you call your bust factor, especially at the edge position, is extremely limited. High upside, high, low. So he could be a superstar. He could wash out without playing any significant snaps for the Atlanta Falcons. And Phillips is exactly the opposite. He falls to the 4th because he's not all that big. He's not all that fast, but he's a Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year at cornerback because all he does is make plays. Someone that reminded me of was the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. Wasn't all that big, wasn't all that fast, but he was just one hell of a football player. That's just who he was. So I think, you might not have the lockdown Deion Sanders cornerback here, but I think you're talking about Phillips as being a productive member of this team for a while. I think he's got, when we talk about ceilings, it's not super high. It's not AJ Terrell. It's not even Jeffrey Okudah. But his floor will be higher than Jeffrey Okudah's. Like, Okudah's probably seen worse play than you'll ever get from Clark Phillips. So that's my take on him. Very, very interesting how those were very different draft philosophies. I got my potential, I got my prospect, and I got my player. And guys that have both are the ones that go in the first round. You know, I kind of keep it on a chart when I was doing rankings. You're like, okay, the guys at the very top are the ones that have all those measurables and make all the plays. And then you typically in football, you bet on athleticism, because this isn't baseball. It's not a skill game. It's a bigger, faster, stronger game. So you typically bet on the athleticism, and then the production, depending on how well they produce, can end up. You think of a line graph. Where does that intersect? Production will usually, or potential will usually trump production if the production isn't matched with the requisite physical tools. Hope that makes sense. Want to get back into another question in here. Kevin Mapp says, it does feel like lately the media, the attitude is shifting a bit, and we're starting to get credit for revamping this team moving forward. I agree, Kevin. And it seems like people are like, oh, wait, they did do any things besides just name Desmond Ridder as a starter. Holy cow. You know, I took issue with, I think it was Bill Barnwell. You know, he came up with his, like, who had the best off-season rankings, which to me is like, who's most improved. And it looked almost identical to a power ranking. You know, you can have a really good off-season and still be a bad team. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You know, so if don't even have a first-round pick, limited in free agency, but I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm not saying they didn't have a first-round pick, you know, and he's got them at, like, you know, top 3. Well, you know, really, you know, what tools did they have to have such a great offseason that they're that much better? I mean, how do you not look at what the Atlanta Falcons did and say this isn't one of the most improved teams in football? They've got Desmond Ridder. They had Desmond Ridder last year. That didn't change. So it's not like they lost and went backwards there. That you're already at a baseline with Desmond Ridder as your quarterback. You didn't get worse because Desmond Ridder is the quarterback. You were already, if you thought he was bad, he's still bad. What all went around him? Well, what all went around him was a ton of money into the defense with really good productive pros. Arguably the most dynamic player in the draft in Bijan Robinson for a team that will know how to use him. You talk about left guard, you know, Jonnu Smith is and, you know, Matt Collins, Scotty Miller, these guys are kind of unsung, but they're upgrades. You know, and Kyle Pitts coming back. Okay. So I think people are starting to pay attention a little bit. Mark Schrader coming in from Texas. Good morning, Mark, over on YouTube. Appreciate you being here. Grab a sip of coffee. So, yeah, when it comes to most improved, that one bugged me a little bit. There was another one, and I think, Kevin, you called it out. Kevin Mapp may have called it out. Maybe it was Kevin Fitzgerald, where they were dogging the Atlanta Falcons for not getting much help behind Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, but giving praise to the Indianapolis Colts for getting Gardner Minshew to give help to Anthony Richardson, the rookie quarterback. I'm like, Taylor Heineke has outperformed and outproduced Gardner Minshew across the board. Whatever metric you want to look at, Taylor Heineke was better than Gardner Minshew. And you're going to rag on the Falcons for getting Heineke while praising the Colts for getting Gardner Minshew? It's a little bit, it doesn't quite add up for me on that one. That's a little bit of a double standard. And I said, yeah, he kind of stepped in it on that one. I do some work with the Colts, so I was paying a keen eye on that one. I saw that one stepped out for me. It's like, you can't have that both ways. You know, if I think personally, I think Heineke is a very, very good insurance policy and number 2 quarterback who could come in and run this offense with his mobility and his experience. All right, let's move on. Wanted to talk about what CBS Sports had a story out there from Chris Trapasso. Apology if I ruin your name, Chris. About guys that are in for a breakout contract year. Maybe somebody that you may not have heard of, who you will at the end of this season. Someone like Foye Oluokun, Russell Gage. We saw that happen after the 2021 season. Nobody knew who Russell Gage was or Foye Oluokun, and they both got roughly 8-figure deals. I think Oluokun got about 13 or 14 million. I think Russell Gage got somewhere near 10 on his free agent deal. Now, this was a linebacker he chose, but he chose Michael Walker when he did that one. So he said he picked Michael Walker as the guy who has quietly, he goes, this is a guy you've never even heard of. I'm like, I'm not sure a lot of Falcons fans know who Michael Walker is. I mean, we do. If you guys are on a podcast on a Wednesday morning, you know exactly who Michael Walker is. But I didn't realize Michael Walker hit 100 tackles last year. He's always been pretty good in coverage. And it may be one of the reasons why they were comfortable letting Rashaan Evans, not re-signing Rashaan Evans, come back. You got Michael Walker, you got Caden Ellis, you got Troy Anderson as your first three. Trapasso thinks that Michael Walker could be the guy that ends up making one of the guys that makes a splash. Now, what hurt his argument for me was he only named 5 guys. One more guy down, I think, was Braylon Edwards, who the Falcons had last year, who they acquired from the Raiders, and I think saw action in one game. He's like, okay, this was a draft crush. He's back with Derek Carr in New Orleans. I think he can come around. Okay, I'll give you that one. But I'm like, man, that's not great company to be in. This guy might not see a field again. He was not great. Unless there was some stuff going on, Arthur Smith won't tell us. He'll protect his guys for the most part, unless there was some injury concerns or anything like that. Then I don't have a whole lot of high hopes for, Edwards becoming the next big paid wide receiver out there for the Saints. All right. Sean Alexander Risher coming in. Welcome in, Sean Alexander. One of my favorite. I actually went to Auburn, and I still loved Sean Alexander at Alabama. He was so good. The media seems to be upset because we didn't listen to their full push on the Falcons selling the farm for Lamar Jackson. Yeah, Sean, we've hit on that a bunch. I've used the word fixation, where it's like, this guy's not available, and we're not the ones in Atlanta that aren't not signing him. It's he's property of the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens. They're the ones that are obligated to get a deal done, not the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know which talking head show it was, but he did a clip on it. It's like, oh, they're not serious about winning if they're not going after Lamar Jackson. With Desmond Ridder, Colin Cowherd saying, how can this be an 8-win team with Desmond Ridder as your quarterback? Well, Desmond Ridder was solid last year. When we get to PFF rankings, I'll take a little bit of issue with that one as well. Desmond Ridder showed flashes last year with one wide receiver, with Drake London. Drake London had a really good close to his year. Excuse me. Without when you're out there with Kadero Hodge is your next guy out there. Olamide Zaccheaus. These guys are 4s and 5s. And Ridder started off a little slow against New Orleans in his first start. Wow, there's a big story. Didn't have a great first start in the NFL. Wow, news at 11. But then played really well and got better in each of his next games. What was the competition like? Doesn't matter. It's still the NFL. And it was good for him to get his experience in there. It would have been nicer to see him a little bit sooner, but this wasn't a team that was going anywhere. So if Arthur Smith thought that he wasn't quite ready and could have done more harm than good by keeping him out there, then so be it. But Ridder was okay. But yeah, Sean, it's like the Falcons ruined our narrative by not pursuing a guy that was going to cost him 5 draft picks and $200 million. Instead, they built up. And what did they get instead of Lamar Jackson? They got Bijan Robinson and a defense, and they've got their first round pick next year and the year after that right now as well. Joe Cannon coming in on Facebook. He says, great morning, Scott. To you as well, my friend. It's great to see you. It's been a little bit. We were out for about 2 weeks. We're back now every Wednesday, Monday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. And we will be live. Ryan Adonis says Foye got an insane contract for being a 7th round pick. That, Ryan, I agree. And Foye I think he got 3 years, 45, so probably 2 and 30 guaranteed. That wasn't just an insane contract for being a 7th round pick. That was an insane contract for being an inside linebacker these days. And then they went and used a high draft pick, I believe, on, what was it, Muma, who they got out of, where was he? Colorado State, Utah. I don't remember where Muma came from. And they put a ton of money into the linebacker position. It's a little strange, but maybe they had it. And, Ryan also says that Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone are being asked to play outside linebacker in the defense now. More space for them to work with and what they have to cover. I think that'll just be – it's going to be a little more complex for them. You'll still see them rushing off the edge. I mean, an outside linebacker up on rushing is an edge rusher. And I think we're going to see multiple fronts. So – Ryan Nielsen did a great job of getting pressure from multiple areas. He might not have a guy with 20 sacks, but he'll have 5 or 6 guys with 5 or 6 sacks. And that should be more interesting. It'll make it harder to pin down where the pressure is coming from. So I'm very interested to see this. And I'm hoping we didn't see a whole lot from Malone last year. That's okay. He's a mid 3rd round pick. And AK showed flashes. Arnold Ebiketie showed flashes last year. So I'm hoping he can step up. When we get into the rankings and PF here in just a moment, I'm gonna say that's still a little bit of a concern for me is that position. Kevin Fitzpatrick says Ritter has faith from the coaching staff and front office. That's good enough for me. Where else he seems to have it is from his teammates. From his teammates is where he seems to have it. And I think he's playing. He finished well. We'll get to that one. We'll start with the quarterbacks when we get into quarterback rankings here in just a moment. Big Ant, appreciate you being in. Good morning, Scott, and everyone in the chat. To you as well. And just speaking of Malone, Kevin says, I'm a little worried about Malone's development. Should I be? He was thin, pogo stick springy, which I like, but I wasn't expecting much from him. He's a traits guy, good speed, nice length, little undersized. The moved outside linebacker might do him some good, where he can use his agility and get out in space a little bit more and go seal an edge and use his speed to the outside every once in a while might be a little bit better for him. Kevin asks, where's Nick? Nick is still out hiking and doing all this kinds of stuff. If you follow him on Twitter at Nick Kendall, MHH, he's posting some of the pictures that he's getting, and it's pretty amazing. He's out there enjoying the Pacific Northwest summer as well. So we're at 30 minutes, about good time for a transition and a big slug of coffee. All right, I wanted to get into, let me finish, because the second thing I wanted to talk about was breakout players. One of the guys that's being talked about as a breakout player a lot is Caden Ellis on the defensive side of the ball. He started 11 games, played in 17 with the Saints last year, has been a special teams force for the last 3 seasons, really broke out for them last year, which is why he got a nice big chunk of change. In 11 starts, he had 7 sacks. 7 sacks, I believe, would have led the Falcons last year. So it will be nice being able to use him in a variety of roles. We talk about outside linebacker, inside linebacker. Use him where you think you can. He's a little bit of a wild card. The athleticism that he has, combined with Troy Anderson, who is a spectacular athlete, is going to bring some speed to that inside position, that inside linebacker position. So looking forward to seeing him, and he is being touted a lot as a breakout player. Now, Pete Schrager yesterday or the day before named Drake London as one of his breakout players. That was interesting to me for 2 reasons. One, he already broke out. As far as I'm concerned, about 900 yards as a rookie, a top 10 PFF ranking as a wide receiver. He had a couple crucial mistakes last year, dropping the ball after the catch was one of the big ones, the fumbles. It's got to get cleaned up. But I don't think he's exactly a sleeper coming into this year. But the second reason that was interesting to me with naming Drake London, well, what has to go right for a wide receiver to have a good season? Quarterback play has to be pretty good. So maybe Pete's not ready to just throw the season away for the Atlanta Falcons because Desmond Ridder is a quarterback. Maybe that guy's going to be okay. Maybe he's going to be okay. Want to say hello to Terry Ocean Boy Martin, also coming in real quick. First comment, at least that's the one I saw. It says, Malone is nice. I think he was solid when he actually played last year. Year two, I think he should be more comfortable and competitive because he's seen last year should be slowed down for him. Absolutely. And the other part of that y'all have to remember is from January through April for rookies, what had they been doing from January to April before their rookie season? Working out. All they're doing is just getting and it's like, well, don't they always work out? Yeah, but that's not what I mean. They're working out for a test, not for football. They're working out for their combine drills and their pro days. They're focused almost 100% entirely on physical testing. Now, not only do they, so then they get to OTAs and whoosh, it's a crash course. It can be overwhelming to them at sometimes as they try and learn their way and what they're supposed to do. Well, now they got a season under their belt, and maybe as importantly, they're going to have an off season under their belt. So yeah, they're going back to their personal trainers at home and they're working out in January, February, March. They're still doing that, but now they also can watch film and know who they're playing for, how they're going to be used, some of the reads they need to be. The coaches are in touch with them in this 4-month period that last year was just kind of a purgatory for them. Now they're being used. Now they know their job. You know your job, learn your job. So it's actually the second year jump should be real. So I agree with you, Terry, and appreciate that. PFF had a ton of rankings, obviously, and let me see if I have the oh crap. They have Ritter come in at 31. Okay, fine. Let me drop this link in the chat. I do like to do that when we're talking about one. So they've got the links to all of those in there. They've got Ritter at 31. Okay, so be it. Would I put CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans ahead of Desmond Ritter? Probably not. But okay, what has he done to really show up that he belongs above even, say, a Baker Mayfield? Now, Sam Howell, number 27, Washington Commanders. Come on. No. You can't have him 4 spots ahead about Desmond Ritter. Here's where I take issue with what they said about Desmond Ritter. It opens up by saying there was little we saw from Ritter last season to suggest he will approach even average play at the position. What? Little we saw last year to say he would have even average play at the position. So for those of you listening at home, let me look up his numbers here again real quick. But I think after he had a rough start, he had like a 92.4 quarterback rating over his last 3. It may have even been better than that because, yeah, he threw 26 times and had just 97 yards in his very first start. Okay, he struggled, was sacked 4 times. Next one, his rating against the Baltimore Ravens was 85.2. Next one, 90.1 against Arizona. And finally, against Tampa, his quarterback rating was 108.2. He finished with two touchdown passes and 0 interceptions. Oh, and by the way, he can run. He can run the ball really well. He was a 4.5 guy at the NFL Combine. So, okay, Tampa pulled Tom Brady. So what? Arizona was awful last year, and I think in the initial ranking, in the initial Vegas lines, they were underdogs in all 17 games coming up. So he went, I'm not even going to go through the numbers again, but basically it went 50, 80, 90, 100. he showed improvement in all 4 of his games. Finished with a 92.4. And if I remember right, the 92.4 would have put him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson as a passer, and would have been about 10th in the NFL. Small sample size. Okay. Say that. Not, we didn't see anything to suggest to get even average play. Really? Because his last 3 games would have put him in the top half of NFL starters. That's above average for you math people out there. I just took issue with that one. I did. I took issue with that statement. I saw plenty. And you know who else did? Y'all did. You all did. Now, there is the vocal minority that will come out there and say, he can't do it, that are Falcons fans. That happens. 4 million Falcons fans. So, there's going to be people out there that disagree. But for the most part, without fail, most Falcons fans are saying, yeah, I want to see Ritter next year. I want to see what he can do. I saw enough that I want to see more. Did you see anything that suggested that he couldn't be even an average quarterback in this league? I didn't. I've been doing this a long time. I saw glimpses of solid. I'm not saying he's going to turn into Mahomes, but to just bury the guy and say he's the worst quarterback in the NFL, including the rookies who haven't taken a snap, and we didn't see anything, well, then you weren't watching. Flat out. If you didn't see anything that suggested you couldn't get average play from this guy, you weren't watching. That's my take on that one. And when we talk about, Ryan says a rough start for a rookie quarterback in his first game. Yeah, how about first season? I wonder what people thought about Peyton Manning and Troy Aikman. Didn't Peyton throw 4 interceptions his first game or something crazy? Those were my formative years, Ryan, with Troy Aikman. So I remember that more than I remember like last week. The long-term works pretty good. Trying to make new long-term memories when you're, my age gets tougher. So Troy Aikman was 1-15. I believe he was, I know he was. He was the number 1 overall pick in 1989. And he went 1-15 his first year with the Dallas Cowboys. But, since Desmond Ritter went in the 3rd round, obviously he can't possibly be any good. Didn't beat out Marcus Mariota. Well, maybe that was by design. The Falcons have been pointing to 2023 since they took the job. Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot came in together. And, Terry comes in and he says, I love your show, bro. Your takes are very thought out and honest. By far one of the non-biased Falcons fans. And I'll just jaded Terry. But Terry also got a little bit mad because last year I was like, listen, the Falcons are only going to be favored. I was trying to warn Falcons fans because you saw it last year that, when the Falcons would lose a game that maybe they were in and close, people are starting to get mad at Arthur Smith. I'm like, guys, they got $90 million in dead cap money. This team is put together with duct tape. It's 2023. This is when it starts. This is when the rebuild, when we can start hitting bottom and start coming back. That's when to look for. And the Falcons, for me, overachieved with 7 wins last year. So this is when it starts. It's 2023. As far as when it's time to be excited to watch the Falcons again, they're just trying to survive the last couple of years, man. They're just trying to survive them. One of the questions, moving on from quarterback, I gave you my take on quarterback. The other one that's a big concern for me is the edge. And the rankings for edge rushers came out about where I thought they would be because they did the top 32. And I said to myself, as I'm opening up this article on PFF, I'll be surprised if the Falcons have somebody on this list. They didn't. They didn't have anybody on this list. So they didn't have anybody in the top 32, and I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that at all. When you're talking about Lorenzo Carter, journeyman, who's penciled in as a starter, Bud Dupree, final year of his deal, Arnold Ebiketie hasn't done it yet. So what you're hoping is Arnold Ebiketie is on that list next year. Plays so well that he's on that list next year. But for me, there is still a big need for that edge, for that pass rusher. It just wasn't there this year. It didn't work out. That was what I wanted in the draft. Wasn't the right time, I really like Lucas Van Ness as a possibility. but he was considered a little too risky, I guess. Nolan Smith fell. He fell all the way to the back. That would have been too high. And then was it Tyreek Wilson? He went higher. He was gone way before that, and so was Will Anderson. So sitting at 8, I'm okay with them going where they did with running back for the circumstances. Don't reach. That's the key. Is did you feel that for me is one of the biggest needs on the team is edge, is still a dominant edge rusher. They used a 2nd-round pick on Ebiketie and a 3rd-round pick on Malone, a 3rd-round pick on Harrison. Hopefully some of those guys start stepping up. Ebiketie showed flashes last year. Harrison has the traits and the tools to be a beast. Can he? We will see. Some new folks coming in. Want to say hello, like to this guy, bald-headed Falcons fan. Prove it. That's a Falcon in your signature screen there. I want to see this. Bald-headed Falcons fan. So Ritter was born a winner, and that was one of the things. Cincinnati is a good program. He didn't just start it up, but he was one of the winningest quarterbacks in college football history, and they rave about him there. About his ability to lead a team. So and Raymond says about Ritter, Ritter's impressed me in being confident so far, saying the right things, improving to be a leader of our team, which isn't easy as a 2nd-year guy. It's a young offense that helps. Your offensive line is where your veterans are, and for the most part, those guys are fairly quiet. They're like the guy behind the guy. They can be leaders, but they can be backing the leader, meaning I'm not going to do the talking. He is, but if you have a problem with him, you're going to have to answer to me. Those are offensive linemen. Those are the guys I want. Mention edge. I had no problem with them being not having anyone in the 32. Now, the other one that was a little bit interesting to me was guard. Chris Lindstrom was the number 1 rated player in football by PFF. Not just guard. He was the number 1 rated player in football. Any position. Okay? And I'm going to post that link in the chat. So what I do like about these is they basically admit that their rankings are subjective using data that is also subjective, because when you talk about a win or a loss, you have to make a judgment. It's not okay, this team is 2-0. Those are facts. This is, I think this guy won this rep. It's more like boxing. It's more like figure skating. You have to judge who won the rep, and not everybody judges those similarly. So the player grades are subjective as well. We treat them like they're objective data, but they're not. They're subjective as well. But Chris Lindstrom was the highest graded player in football with a 95, any position. And he comes in at number 4 on their offensive guard list. And they admit that he probably has an argument for more. With PFF grades that have jumped significantly every season since he entered the league, including a league best 95 mark in 2022. Again, that's not just guards. That's football. Lindstrom has a case to be 3 spots too low on this list. The players above him have impressed for longer. The 3 players above him are 1, Zach Martin, with a 72.8 last year. Quentin Nelson was so bad last year that they didn't put his number. Like I said, I do some work at the Colts, so I pay attention. It was in the 60s. For a 2nd straight year, he was below 75. And then Joel Bentonio from the Cleveland Browns. So they're knocking Chris Lindstrom for not having the body of work of someone like Quentin Nelson. But he's beaten Quentin Nelson 2 years in a row. Maybe 3. I'd have to look it up, but it's definitely been 2 years in a row. It's not like Chris Lindstrom is just now showing up for the first time. One of my favorite lines, I don't know if y'all remember the movie Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise. One of the first time he's running the track and he comes off and Robert Duvall says, you did this, and you got a little lucky. You got a little lucky coming on a turn and almost got away from you. And Tom Cruise says, if you think it was luck, let's do it again. Just that line is so awesome. Chris Lindstrom has done it. It wasn't an aberration. He has kept doing it. I don't know how you have him anywhere but number one. And here's the question I have for you. Who on earth would trade Chris Lindstrom for Quentin Nelson right now? Who? No one. No one. If you had Chris Lindstrom on your team and you had Quentin Nelson, who's making that trade? Contracts or not, they're both making about the same money. They're both $20 million a year guards. Who's making that trade? Answer me that before you put Chris Lindstrom at number 4, okay? Because there isn't a soul out there that would do that. So want to say hello to some more folks coming in as the chat's opening up, including Smitty Sports Machine. Smitty does an awesome job. Appreciate you coming in here. He runs his own pod. And it's good to have you in here. And if you ever need me for anything, be happy to join you. And let's do the same. It's the summertime. Would love for you to come on to my show. We can talk some Falcons. And if you need me for anything to talk Falcons draft, some other teams, I have an interest in beyond the Falcons. Let me know. It would be great to join you, Smitty. So welcome in. I'm a big fan of your work. Let me hear, we say here, Ryan says, wait until after this year, every single player in the Falcons will be talked about differently. Winning does that. Winning will do that for sure. And as Smitty said, Lindstrom passed Nelson in 2021. He didn't just pass him, he lapped him. Quentin Nelson has been substandard the last 2 seasons, not just 1, 2. Now they're hoping that Shane Steichen come in. You've got a very dynamic quarterback where they will run the ball again. Does it start sounding familiar? Running the ball, which should help them. But I really don't know how you could do that after 2 years. 1 year, okay. One of the other positions I thought was a little interesting here was center. Drew Dahlman. I almost put in when I wrote this up yesterday. If we're asking ourselves, I almost put this in the headline, but I didn't want to. I couldn't do it. The weak link. If y'all are looking and thinking about the offensive line for the Atlanta Falcons, you got a rookie at left guard now, but they passed up some decent players last year. Eli Wilkinson played well last year. Matt Hennessy did a good job filling in. Gassett did pretty well when he filled in, but they went and used a high pick, second-round pick on Matthew Bergeron, and he's a plug-and-play at left guard. Okay, and if you're going to use a high pick like that in that spot for a team that wants to run the ball, when you had other options, I got to figure they feel pretty good about Matthew Bergeron being pretty good as well. Who was a concern for me halfway through the season last year was Drew Dahlman. I wrote it up on All Falcons because I remember when Nick and I were doing this, I'm like, okay, they're going to have to do something at center. They're going to have to do something at center as we're working through the year. And I said to Nick after the Bears game, before we went on a pod, I said, I want you to watch Dahlman. I want you to watch Dahlman in this game. He was phenomenal. He was absolutely phenomenal. Now, that was his highest grade by far. I think he got an 89.5 or almost a 90 on that grade. But he finished the season with grades in the 70s. I think 4 of his last 5 games were like 75 plus on the grades, and it showed. He played that way. This wasn't just, I think the guys from PFF grading the Falcons did a good job. When I would watch it, if what they graded matched what I thought, okay, call me arrogant, whatever. I thought they did a good job. There's some times where I don't see that. You know, ESPN calling Dalton Reisner a road grader as he's getting blasted into the backfield every other play for the Denver Broncos. That's not a good job. But Dahlman, to me, he was ranked for the center coming in. I think he was 11. He was 13, so top half. He says in only his second year in the league, first year as a starter, Dahlman ranked 11th among centers with a 69.5 PFF run blocking grade. There's room for improvement in pass protection, whereas 27 total pressures were 5th most at the position. Okay, so there's room for improvement there. This team's going to want to dictate, and he did a really good job of getting to the second level. And as he grows up and gets those, old man muscles. This is only his third year, but in his first year as a starter, the improvement I saw from him, I was happy with. Not that it matters to the Atlanta Falcons, but Dwayne Ledford, I think, is a magician with what he has done with this offensive line. Now, they've put some good resources into the offensive line, but this offensive line hasn't been that good. In 2020, it was bad, and they had a lot of the same players there. 2021, it was okay, maybe a little better. McGarry was a problem. I'm sorry, it wasn't okay. The line was bad because Mayfield was awful, and the center was bad, and the right tackle was bad. It was one of the reasons why I didn't think the 2022 team was going to win 7 games. All of a sudden, fast forward through the whole of 2022, Matthews is still solid. You got good play from Eli Wilkinson. Dahlman started off getting beaten early in his first year as a starter. Big surprise. Played better through the second half. Chris Lindstrom was the best offensive guard in football. And Caleb McGarry was really, really good. The improvement they made was astounding. So Dahlman being a 13 center, it's fine. He's got Bergeron, who should be pretty good. And he's got Lindstrom on one side, on the other side. If he's playing average, he's good. If he's playing above that, which he was at the end of last year, and he moves up, I think he's not the weak link in this. I don't think there is a weak link in this offensive line now that Drew Dahlman, and I wouldn't have said that this time last year or even in October, halfway through the season. If you had asked me, I would have said, the Falcons are going to have to do something at center. Well, they did. They stuck behind Drew Dahlman, and Drew Dahlman improved. So very, very good for all of them. So I guess the other one I wanted to talk about was Tyler Algier. He came in at number 17, which that seems kind of low. But you start looking at the names around him, just above him, just below him. You're like, I could make an argument for Joe Mixon being ahead of 17. I think that it's fair. Tyler Algier's got 1 year under his belt, and he's ahead of some really good names, and there's some really good names ahead of him. What it reminds me of is, part of the argument why you don't want to take a running back with number 8 is because there's a lot of good running backs. There's a lot of good running backs in the NFL, and you don't have to use an elite pick or elite money to get really good play from the running back position. So Tyler Algier at number 17 after a rookie season, I think he may be overshadowed a little bit by Bijan Robinson this year. We'll see, but Algier was freaking good. He was really freaking good last year. All right, guys, I got to get out of here. Going for almost an hour by myself. My voice is about to give out for a little bit, so I'm going to give it a break. Terry, he said he stopped watching for a little while because I was overly negative. I understand that. Dude, I'm 50 years old. I've lived through some awful Atlanta Falcons times, Atlanta Braves times. I don't even have to mention them. You know what they are. But I grew up in the 80s. The Falcons had one winning season in the 80s, and that was 1980. I was 7. I didn't see another winning season until I was 18 years old. He says, I told y'all last year, this time the offensive line, your head coach played line. If anyone knows the line, it's Smith. Much improved. They not picking up Caleb McGarry's 5th-year option was the right move. And then they actually got him for a pretty good deal. They got him at lower prices. So there was the lines of scrimmage for me were the biggest pleasant surprises, Terry. The offensive line went from awful to one of the best units in the league. Man, that doesn't happen in one season without some imports. And the only new player, they did change 2. They changed their center. And Eli Wilkinson was a huge improvement over Jalen Mayfield. But the defensive line, the leap that Taquan Graham made, and God, I hope he comes back healthy, from year 1 as a rookie to year 2 last year was exponential. Taquan Graham, for me, is the player that is least talked about among Falcons fans as being a really, really good football player. If he's a second string guy, and second string guys get 40% of the snaps on the defensive line, that's okay. If he's moved to the second team and playing those reps and he's healthy, this is going to be a hell of a defensive line. It's going to be so much better coming in. But those were the two big reasons for the lines of scrimmage for me. So let me see here. Michael asked mailing address, message me your mailing address. Michael, hit me up. Just shoot me an email. I don't always check my messages on the different Facebook pages I use. Just send me an email. It's Skinnity, SKI. I went to Auburn. I went there and they made fun of the way I talked. So my redneck buddies at Auburn slurred my name together and they're like, "Hey, Skinnity." And Skinnity is a whole lot more available than S. Kennedy when you're talking social media and email. So it's just Skinnity@gmail.com. Shoot me a note and I'll get back to you. So Michael Ranquillo closing us out. Great show, Scott, on the Falcons podcast. Appreciate you, Michael. But we are going to get out of here real quick. Smitty, we don't want to go through this. 34 years as a Falcons fan. I've seen the ups and downs. 1980 was the first real season I remember with the Atlanta Falcons. So that's what, 40? This will be my 44th season, really following the Atlanta Falcons. And how did that 1980 season go? They went 12-4 and blew a 2-touchdown lead to the Dallas Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs. Little did we know at the time. On that note, y'all, I'm going to get out of here. Check us out, Falcons Podcast on Apple Pods. Give us a rating. It helps us out a ton. And appreciate y'all being back here. We were gone for just 2 weeks, and it was great to have everybody back. I'm glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to spending the summer with y'all. It's hump day, but you know what? We're on the way down, so I'm just going to go ahead and say have a great weekend. And again, thanks for being here, and we'll see you on Monday.